Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. We have Adam Winch from Defenders USA on the show today. And we're going to be talking about subjects like how do you see your current self-defense environment and what type of firearms training do you recommend before people start with that stuff? What are the biggest mistakes you can see people making and when choosing a firearm and choosing training and how to choose an instructor. So today, like I said, we have Adam from Defenders USA, and this is his first time on the channel. And who is Adam Winch? Tell us a little bit about your background. And, I've seen your resume, and dude, it's huge. So you're going to have to paraphrase. It's all you. Tell us about Adam Winch.
Okay, nothing huge, right? A lot of people have done far more than me, but anyways, missionary kid, grew up in West Africa, came back to the States, immediately ran off to a military college. So think like VMI, West Point, Citadel. Did that for a bit. Later joined the U.S. Army, went in as a reservist and joined an MP unit because, well, I just wanted to be a civilian cop. And at the time we weren't, 9/11 hadn't happened yet. So we weren't at war. And I figured that might be a good way to break into the cop world and get some military experience. Went off, did that for a bit. And then later, of course, as I came out of everything from the military side, I went off to a civilian police academy. And of course, right then and there is when 9/11 happened. So we knew there was 4 of us guys in there, all military. We knew instantly we were getting deployed. And of course, later we did. But anyways, able to finish the police academy and became a police officer in Grand Junction, Colorado. And when had only been there about 8 months, my unit, which was full of cops, right? They were all cops or SWAT cops of some type.
Sounds about right.
Yep. We got deployed. So we became the Army's redheaded stepchild for a while, kind of moving around the Kuwait or Southern Iraq, Saudi Arabia, that type of thing. And did that for a bit. Later came back to the U.S., immediately went back to work as a cop in Grand Junction. And while I was there, SWAT team, street crimes, trainer, yada, yada. Did that for a little over a decade. And then somewhere along the line, the last 3 or 4 years I was a cop, I kind of kept griping and moaning that all these victims of crime that I saw, that they needed the training myself and my buddies had. And finally, somebody challenged me to do something about it instead of just griping about it. So I started a gun training company, a defensive training company. I wouldn't really call it a gun training company because though I do that a lot, I'm really trying to affect this and really be more defensive in nature and not just guns. It grew and grew to where ultimately I had kind of the choice. I could either take this full time or stay a cop. And well, I've always wanted to own a business in America. So I thought I'll try it. And I figured if I fail, I'll just go back to being a cop. And well, 10 years later, it's still going strong and growing. So that's where I'm at.
Perfect. Well, I mean, you actually went right into the next question that I was going to ask you. So I guess perfect. Great job. Let's go ahead and get in it. So how do you see how do you see our current self-defense environment here in America?
Ooh, I see it highly litigious. I see it as deeply and personally affecting. One, because, well, it's a traumatic event. If you have to pull a gun and go bang a defensive life against something or people that are evil, I mean, it's going to be a very emotional, traumatic event. But I think oftentimes that mental, emotional side that is so harsh on people really also becomes the high litigious nature that is within the community, the country we live in, right? An extremely judicious system. It's a horrible, terrible beast. Probably also at the same time, the very best legal system the world's ever known. But it's a terrible beast when you're the one that's the subject of it. But also the financial side. I mean, this brings extreme financial ruin to people or brings a lot of financial strain. And then, of course, there's just the emotional trauma, having gone through this or maybe taken life or almost have taken life and possibly almost lost yours or something else. And you combine that with all the religious effects, societal effects, right? We have a lot of the world that's not been taught that it's okay to use violence. And I'm talking our world in America.
Yeah.
Right? We taught our boys and girls in school to stop fighting, right? Don't fight. And, don't use violence, use your words. Well, suddenly when people have been told not to use violence and they get forced into using violence, whether it's just an intuitive response to somebody trying to kill them, and it's just an instinctual response, or whether they do it because they know they needed to. Suddenly our society as a whole tends to look down on those people because they had to use violence, even within our own families, our own friends, and it changes our relationships. And I found we Americans, for some reason, we like to be liked, and we like to be liked the way we're liked by our friends and family and coworkers. And when we suddenly had to use extreme violence on another human being because we as a generation for the last couple have been told don't fight, suddenly the way we're looked at by our own friends and family and coworkers becomes different than what we're used to. And that adds to the strain that's already financial, legal, everything else. And suddenly it makes it extremely hard with all these different pressures to survive the mental, emotional, and I'd even tell you the spiritual aftermath of those things. So to me, right, any monkey can learn to shoot a gun, usually poorly. And believe me, I've seen monkeys shoot guns. I grew up in Africa. But I mean, you can literally give a gun to a monkey and they'll pull the trigger.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, right, most of us don't learn to shoot well. To me, you could probably save your life with a gun, whether you have training or not. It's surviving the massive aftermath that comes that is so hard to do. And I've seen marriages destroyed. I've seen families destroyed. People destroy their credit. They drown their sorrows in a bottle, a needle, and too much credit, and ignoring their family or becoming too drill sergeant-ish with their own family by burying themselves in their work when they shouldn't, or not doing enough in work. And so you just see kind of a roller coaster of things that happen. I think the defensive environment, back to the heart of your question, the defensive environment in litigious U.S. America becomes very hard to survive compared to what it was 50 years ago, or compared to what it might be even in some other lands where we're not such a judicious litigious environment, if that answers your question.
Yeah.
So I see that brings a lot of pressure to people. And unfortunately, the sexy part of what I do is the gun training, right? Everybody wants to go bang with a gun and be cool and be John Wick with a gun. But really, I think you could spend a equal proportional amount of time preparing this and this for, one, the moment, and two, the massive aftermath that comes to better survive that event and to become the better person through it and to live better lives through it versus driving ourselves or our families down the toilet.
Yeah, I definitely believe there should be a psychological aspect of firearms training. I'm not a fan of shooting round targets. Simply because if you ever have to use a firearm in defense of yourself, your brain's gonna be looking for that center. It's not gonna be looking for center mass. It's gonna be looking for that red center of the target. And it's gonna slow you down a little bit. But like you said, it's the aftermath of having to put somebody down. It's not fun. It's not fun. And doing it over time, you do a little harden to it. Realize you're gonna have to live with the rest of your life. And it's funny too, because on the litigious side, when I was listening to you speak, it's interesting because I remember there was a gentleman who lived down the road from me, and two men decided to knock on his door and try to break in. He literally fell back to the ground, grabbed a pistol because he knew he could defend from the ground better, and then shot up at them, shot them both, killed one of them, wounded the other one. The wounded guy got away, got taken to the hospital, and then later arrested. The sheriff's office came out. He gave a statement, and that was it. That was absolutely it. They could see through the whole situation, and that there was no legal things happening whatsoever. Fast forward that to literally, I believe it was Monday. Excuse me. There were two political canvassers in Philadelphia. Both of them were armed. One was legally armed, a 22-year-old who was legally armed, and a 46-year-old who was an armed felon. And they're not going into the details, but the man with the training who did it right, who was the technical NRA good guy, ended up killing the 46-year-old felon with a gun. They got into a pissing contest. They won't say how it happened. All they said was that the good guy drew first, is what they said. So he obviously saw a threat. There's something there that they're not telling us. I can't find any details, but they did end the article with no charges have been filed.
That doesn't mean it's not coming, though.
Oh, yeah, exactly, man. you know, there is a slight disdain for police officers in investigation. You know, it's just the way it is. People are always worried that just because he's not here today, he may come back tomorrow. You know, so I just thought it was interesting how you would scope that one out. But
Well, I mean, listening to that story about the political canvasser, the armed felon, uh, knowing no details, as you said, I
yeah,
just tell you, the second you strap on that gun, the ego comes off, man. Or whatever it
yeah,
is, the ego comes off.
exactly. Well, the funny thing was is they were both political canvassers that worked for the same exact political pack.
I don't mean to laugh, but that's hilarious.
It is hilarious. I'm sorry. That's not dark humor. That's just comment like, what is going on?
Yeah.
I mean, they have to wear these little badges. So they both had to go, oh, we're both just on the same team. What is going on? I mean, their spat had to have been so ridiculous that, you know, it caused one guy to shoot the other. I don't know, you know. It's
So
ridiculous.
if I can come back to something you said,
Sure.
right? You said, you know, you do this enough, you become hardened to it. You know, I kind of know the soldier world. I know the police world really well. So that's kind of one of the areas I can talk from, right? You'll find that police officers have had to discharge their weapon in the line of duty, right? It's a total moral, legal, justified shoot type thing where you've pulled the gun, you've shot it. You'll find oftentimes, though that's a rarity in a cop's life, right? Probably only 1 or 2% of our cops are ever going to discharge their gun in the line of duty. Um, but but those who do, their propensity to get into the gunfight next time, another time or 2 or 3 more, is much higher than the average everybody else. Once you've been in one once, you have a likelihood probably about 50 or 60 to 80% of the time, you're going to be the one who's in the next one. One, because you realize how hard it is, how tough it is, everything else, and you tend to go to it a little bit faster. You've kind of through the osmosis or the backward reading of everything that happened to you the first time that you survived, you tend to see the signs better. You tend to be more attuned to the sense of danger, and you tend to be more willing to go to do it, where oftentimes I found that cops, and I see the same thing in civilians, they'll hesitate and hesitate and hesitate to take that shot when they should be shooting, right?
Yeah.
And then that's how we end up filling body bags, or people go to the hospital, or they're just lucky to survive. And so it's very interesting. As you said, they harden up to it. I'd tell you, yeah, that's one way to look at it. Another way is you just become accepting of it, instead of where the first time you're less mentally, emotionally accepting of it, right? You don't believe it's going to happen to you, where once you've been through it, once you're like, it's happening and here we go. And you're much more ready to use that violence. And you've already made better decisions the second time because you've had to after the first time. So you're just kind of ready to go. So we have the same take on that, maybe just a different way to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You don't have to do it as much as we do, which is a really good thing.
Yeah. If you can avoid doing it in your first place,
Yeah,
avoid it.
exactly. I would love not to do this, but yeah, it's
But
kind of get what I paid for, but it's
yeah,
a different job. So,
yeah.
okay. So, the next thing I wanted to ask you was, what type of firearms training do you recommend people start with?
So starting with, okay, now mission drives training, mission drives gear, mission drives everything, right? So I'm going to presume you're asking from the total Joe Jane perspective, or we could say the prepper perspective or something like that. Okay. I'm presuming.
Let me reword it. From learning to defend yourself. You've already taken the NRA safe handling course. You know,
Don't.
you've done that. What's the next step?
Okay. So I would tell you, instead of investing in like long range stuff, rifle training, invest in quality handgun training first. Quality. And I'm not talking your standard NRA, USCCA, that type. I'm not talking that stuff at all. Okay. Go get quality handgun training that builds on several different things, right? I think it's too easy to say builds on the fundamentals, but builds on a true deep understanding of not just the fundamentals of, say, grip, trigger press, sight alignment, or use of a dot if you do that. But I tell you, really work on those fundamentals and know them at a mastery level, because this stuff, it's not just something you got to know how to do. You got to understand the why. So go to where you can learn the why of how you do it, because if you understand the concepts and the why behind the how becomes easier. Where the vast majority of gun training out there, take all the lower name stuff you've named off or I've named off so far. It's just go in, go how, right? This is how you do it. Go bang with a gun. And that doesn't teach you a lot. So I would say go to somebody that can literally break it down. on a conceptual level to where you as a person taking the training can understand it in the mental picture with which you think, or the mental movie picture with which you think, so it makes sense to you and you can apply it for you. Once you've done that and you've built some mechanical expertise at the fundamentals of basic shooting, then I'd say move into more defensive or fighting training with a gun. Because when you comes time to using this gun defensively, it's a fight. That's just all there is to it. It's a very dynamic athletic event. So therefore, learn to fight with the gun, moving beyond just mere shooting. And unfortunately, the vast majority of training out there that I see people go do is they go off to the standard beginner classes. They think they're ninjas because they shot their 20 little holes in something somewhere, and they think they're ready for the fight of their life, and they're not. Fighting is not different than shooting, but it's a much more advanced version of shooting, I tell you. And it's also much more caveman-like and knuckle dragging. So therefore, myelinating or building the ability to do shooting under stress is a good idea. So I'd tell you, go beyond your basic classes you may have done somewhere, right? Be careful who you go to, but go beyond those things and go into more realistic training. And because it's a perishable skill, update that at least once a year or so. All right. In the meantime, learn how to practice this stuff on your own, right? So you don't have to hire people like me or others that might be expensive or you got to travel to, so you can take the stuff you learn from them, practice from them, so you only have to maybe go update it once a year or so, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense, and that, that kind of leads us into the next thing, since we're talking about training. What are some mistakes that people make when they choose training? Like the flip side of what you're just talking about.
So this is a good question, right? The biggest mistake is you type in gun training on Google or wherever else it is, and the first 5 or 10 pop up and you select them, or because they have a big nationally recognized name, you hit click and you go to them because one, they're easy, they're cheap, they're local. Nothing wrong with any of those things, but I think that the biggest thing most people need to do is really vet their instructors. Spend the time to vet them. Don't just be like, okay, they have this big 3-letter name or this big 4-letter name or big 5-letter name, so therefore I'm going to go to them. You need to vet them and find out, do they have a big diversity in training across kind of all the fighting or shooting platforms, right? Do they have kind of a balance of competition shooting, which really has a lot of application of fighting shooting? They have a balance of defensive type shooting and defensive training. Do they have this type of stuff? Do they have that type of stuff? And have they gone to multiple different instructor training courses of different variations, gotten certifications of those things? And is their own personal training widely varied across different well-known instructors? Now, the vast majority of people out there don't know the names that maybe you know or I know that are what you would consider the big names on the block or in the firearms world. So spend some time to look into these and start seeing repeatable patterns. That if you look at 5 or 10 different instructors, have 2 or 3 of these gone to these names, you can start developing an idea who are the bigger names they've trained with, so that they've developed, a wide array of skills from people that are truly recognized in the industry. Understand, there's only about 100 people like me across the U.S. who do firearms training full-time. It's a very rare thing. The vast majority of people cannot support themselves on just firearms training. They have to do other things to make a living. So if you're just getting a part-time instructor, you're going to get part-time stuff too. And I don't mean that badly. There's some incredible instructors out there. But if you can take the time to find the guys or the girls who do this on a full-time basis, where truly they've delved into this, it's their passion, they've learned it inside and out, you're going to get more bang for the buck going to those type of people than you are going to somebody who just does it occasionally here or there, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you was, what are some of the biggest mistakes people make when they choose a firearm?
Listening to their buddy that was in the Marine Corps, or their daddy told them to get it, or because their husband was in the Army and the husband said go get this, or because their uncle was a cop and their cop said go get this, or their little shooting buddy who likes his gun, or this lady who likes her gun says, no, I love it, you should get this. Or worse, listening to the guys and the girls behind the vast majority of gun counters and gun stores in America.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
that's a good gun. That's a good gun you picked right there.
Oh,
keep going.
No, 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 no. Fighting with a gun for the defense of life is truly a high risk thing. So therefore, you want the most reliable stuff you can get. That's also not going to break your bank, but you don't want to buy the cheapy Rugers and the cheapies this and the cheapies that, or just because somebody likes it, or because it's cute, or because somebody you know is not really deeply into this just made the recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest things is, us cops, we tend to get familiar with the stuff that's issued to us that we liked, right? And oftentimes we're only issued certain brands. Soldiers were only issued certain brands, and it's usually not the best brands, as you know. And then because we got good at it, proficient, or we liked it and became familiar, we recommend that when that's actually one of the worst things you can do. So when you pick guns, find, no different than training, find a true expert.
Mm-hmm.
Find out why they like or recommend certain things. Then go check out the ones they recommend and find the one that fits you, because the bone structures of my wrist, my hands, and my fingers are going to be different than yours. Mm-hmm. And yours are going to be different than whoever might be listening to this, might be testing a gun. And they might look like a gun. It might feel good. It might look sexy. It might do the right things, but it might not fit you right. And gun fit is a thing. So you've got to get your right gun fit in a quality firearm. And there's really only 4 or 5 firearms I personally can recommend out there, just on a moral level. I just can't do it for the vast majority that's out there. So find the ones that are quality, that fit you and fit your purpose. And I mean, that's kind of a lot of things, because for some people, their purpose is concealment. Yet at the same time, I'd say it's got to be able to fight. Others, it's not concealment. You got to fight, but now you got to have some considerations of sleekness of design, or maybe the occasional concealment, right? So there's a lot of different things that go into this. Seek out the advice of an expert and talk to them before you just rely on your buddy or the gun counter guy or the former Army guy who gives you bad advice without realizing they're giving you bad advice.
Gotcha. Okay, so test question.
Okay.
How do you feel about a Glock out of the box?
Glock will tell you it's perfection. I used Glocks for many years as a cop. I would tell you a Glock out of the box will do the job. But to really get it to where the standards, what I would think a gun needs to be, you're going to have to spend the same amount of money that you bought for it. Basically, you got to double the cost to turn it into what I'd call a real gun. So Glock, great. It'll work. It works really, really well. But I'm not a huge fan, right? It'd be one of my topper choices, but then you got to sexy the thing up. You got to work on it to really get it right. Out of the box Glock, you can do better for the same amount or just slightly more money. If not, go spend the money and turn that Glock into what it really should be.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, I asked because that's when everybody asks me what I recommend. I always recommend a Glock. And the only reason I do it, to be honest with you, because that's what we carried. That's,
Yep.
That's what we trained with. Before that, it was the, the Beretta 9mm,
Yep. Oh, yeah.
M9, the big,
Yep.
basically the brick.
Yep.
Yeah. And it just works out of the box regardless. You don't have to do any crazy stuff. I had a Kimber 45 at one point, but I didn't like that I had to break it in, and it cost me $1,800.
Right.
It's like buying a used car for twice the price of a new car,
Right.
But so I turned that sucker right. I took it right back and said, hey, let's trade it for that. But okay, so next a tricky test question. And this is just for me. So I see you got your HK hat on.
Yep.
And I'm interested in purchasing the HK rifle that looks like an AR that fires 7.62 by 39.
So we've got one of those. Absolutely incredible AR platform for a sniper rifle or a long-range precision rifle. Absolutely incredible. That's a 15 to 1,800 yard gun if you know what you're doing. Yep. I mean, we've taken that thing out to 2,003 yards, right? I mean, with a 308. It's fantastic. The design is excellent. That's a good gun. It's heavy, and it should be. That's a good gun. That's a fighting gun right there. It'll survive, busting through the brush or in the marsh and do a good job.
I'm trying to talk myself into buying one, but
hey, come out to one of our sniper courses. You can use one for free and try it out.
Yeah. Well, I haven't pulled trigger on that type of rifle in a long time. My favorite rifle is the M40A1.
Yeah.
with the inertial scope, and that's why. Let's see here. Hopefully, for those of you that know what that's really for. All right, let's see here. I'm trying to think. I don't think I had any other questions for you. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
Okay, yeah. So since you asked a little bit about guns, let me kind of give you an idea, at least handguns defensively, because I think this is an important point, right? Now, understand if you're listening to this and I don't name off the gun that you carry that you like, I'm not saying your mama's ugly and your baby's fat. I'm just telling you that, maybe it might be time to look for something different. And I would tell you, even if you trade a gun for something else, and you lose money on it, it's the best loss you'll ever make in your life because you're investing in life-saving tools, truly life-saving tools. And if you're listening to Local Prepper, you should be interested in true life-saving tools that are of high quality, right, versus just buying the crap that's out there. So of the guns out there, and mea culpa, yeah, H&K. I am an HK brand ambassador. I think 2 or 3 years ago, they came to me and just said, look, you're hawking a lot of our guns, and we like what you're doing, and would you be willing to join our team? And I was very excited by that.
Yes, please.
So yeah, please. So HK Ambassador, I don't get any money out of them, but I did get a bunch of guns out of them that I'm able to let people use and borrow and train with. And I was already carrying it for a long time. So my favorite defensive handgun personally out there is the H&K. I personally carry the VP9, and there's different variations of those from more compact to bigger. I think they're excellent. Another one that's out there that people like a lot is the P30. I'm not a huge fan of that simply because of the hammer on the gun. As a hammer, and I'm not a fan of hammer-fired guns, and maybe sometime I can tell you the story why, but I don't like the fact that there's external stuff that things can get into to impede a fight if you're rolling around, in the mud or something, and I've been there, I've done that. So hammer-fired guns are not a thing for me personally, but it's a good gun. It's bomb-proof. VP9 is the way I'd go. The next gun there, I could tell you, is probably going to be maybe the newer versions of the SIG 320, though if it falls, maybe you should jump on it and save us all if it drops. But the 320 seems like a pretty good gun. I'm not a fan of a couple things of it, but it's a good gun. I wouldn't recommend other SIGs personally for the defensive life, and that's just me personally. The Glock is a great gun. It's absolutely a great gun, but to really get it right, you got to doll the thing up, right? You immediately have to change the sights. I tell you, you need to change the trigger, or at least polish up the trigger and make it a lot smoother and a better break than what it currently is. And you should change the barrel. You should change a couple different things. By the time it's said and done, your $600 Glock or $650 Glock is going to end up being a lot more expensive. Now, they just recently came out with a newer version that seems like have better triggers and stuff. I've not played with that one yet, so we'll see. I've spent some time with it, but I've not spent a lot of time, so not enough to where I can sit there and say it's great. For a while, I actually carried the Smith & Wesson M&P. When it came out, I tried that out for about a year and a half while I was in the police world and on the SWAT team, and I just found enough issues with it. At the time, it was the first generation that I got away from it. I think the M&P newer generations are a bit better, but there's one or two small mechanical things there I'm not a big fan of, but I would put it in the category of guns that I'd recommend. Another one would be the newer Walther PDP versions, or the PDP series. Again, there's 3 or 4 different things on there I'm not a fan of for very specific reasons, but I think it's a bomb-proof gun for the most part, and it does really, really well. I think if you lifted H&K and Walther together, the PDP version, they're almost neck and neck with the H&K, slightly higher in quality and reliability. And I've seen a few problems with Walthers I'm not seen with the H&Ks, but I'd tell you it's probably about right there. It's real close to it. I'd put the Glocks maybe next if you doll it up. The SIG's a little bit lower. And then there's kind of a variety of other guns after that that are decent, but those are the ones I'd tell you probably out of the box you should probably look at to buy. And again, most of them you got to do a little bit of work to. The only one I've not had to do work out of the box out of to make any better so far has been the VP9. And I came to that the right way. I spent a lot of time testing guns, and that's where I ultimately ended up at. So there's kind of some recommendations. So if you're carrying a Glock and you just love it, you've not dolled the thing up, I'd encourage you to invest the time into getting that thing fixed up. Send it to a competent gunsmith, do a lot of work to the trigger, the sights, the barrel, fix the grip to where it molds and fits your hand exactly. The Smith & Wessons, you could do a few things with those. Sometimes the triggers could use a little bit of work. The Walther trigger and the H&K trigger are probably the best on the market for out of the stock striker fire type guns. And, pretty much right there. The SIG, a pretty good gun. I don't like the height over bore compared to the grip on it, but it's a good gun. I don't like the big beaver tail on the back, especially when you're drawing and using its speeds. But good gun overall. And Big Army bought it, which tells me if Big Army buys it, you should probably stay away from it.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, but it does seem to be somewhat reliable. And in the context of a civilian defender, I would tell you it's probably going to do well.
Gotcha. Okay, well, that's cool. While you were talking, I was thinking, so I was shooting at a friend's house. He's actually a gun dealer a couple of weeks ago. And he actually has one of the original Pit Vipers, the 10,000 John Wick guns.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I shot like 10 rounds through it, and I handed it back to him and I said, "You just ruined me." And I had to go back and relearn how to shoot my stock Glock, and it's just amazing, some of these firearms and how easy they can be made to hit the target. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think maybe I will take your advice, and I've got a couple of them, and not Pit Vipers. Those things are 10 grand a piece. But I think I will put, maybe onesies and twosies. Maybe we'll get a red dot on it. Maybe not a red dot, but yeah, that's right. Yeah, rear optical.
Yep.
And maybe get some trigger work, and I don't know. We'll see what happens.
So on that note, can we jump into optics for a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So from the prepper aspect, right? I've talked to some, and I've noticed more than not against having an optic on a handgun because it's going to fail, right? The batteries are going to go off, EMP, whatever. I would tell you move to the dot as fast as you can. Right? A lot of handguns have front and rear sights, bumpy stuff. And I'd tell you in today's world, that's still Amish technology. Move away from that and go to an optic. One, you'll become a far better shooter. You'll become a more target-focused shooter, which you should be anyways, even with front and rear sights on a gun. But you'll become a overall better fundamentalist with how you use a gun. The reason being is when you have front and rear sights, plus you got to line it up on a target, you got 3 different focal planes you got to focus on and get everything in right relationship to ultimately press the trigger. That one takes a lot of time, and unfortunately a lot of the world has stupidly taught for a long time. The firearms world has taught hard front sight focus, which is a total fallacy. You shouldn't be doing. But because of that, we're shifting our vision back and forth between target, front sight, front sight, trying to crystallize things back and forth, fuzz out this, fuzz out that. It's very slow, cumbersome to the brain, and it tends not to work as well as it could be. Also, and if you kind of look in the camera, say this is the front sight, these are the rear sights, if I can line that up, right? Because they're so big and sloppy, we oftentimes can't shoot with high precision with those sights unless we spend a lot of time practicing with it. It's too big and sloppy. Where with a dot, which is one tiny little single space in time, we have one focal thing to focus on, which is the target. If we see the flash of the color of the dot, in your case, sounds like maybe use a red dot. I tend to use a green dot. Whatever dot it is, as soon as you see the flash of the dot where you need to be, you can press the trigger. And now it simply becomes far faster, less confusing to the brain, and allows your attention to stay on it. But it also makes you more precise. And because the dot is so completely unforgiving, meaning if your grip isn't right, your trigger press isn't right, that dot does a lot of things in there that's very confusing to the brain until you learn to truly apply your fundamentals correctly to really stop down the wild dispariting, the wild movement of the dot. When you learn to control that dot, you become a very precise shooter. And then you also learn to be able to use your iron sights a lot better too. So if you want to stay with your iron sights, great. Go get a gun with an optic on it. You learn to use it well. Then go back to your iron sights. You're going to find suddenly you're a far better shooter. Why? Because the dot was so unforgiving. You had to learn to control the dot, and that'll make you a better shooter overall in your gun with Amish technology. So I would tell you move to the dot as fast as possible. Furthermore, right, I'm very abusive on my guns. They're just tools. So I treat them like crazy, right? They get beat up pretty hard in some of the stuff that we do. And I've had the same optic on my personal handgun for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now. And as much abuse as it's taken, the thing has never failed once. So there's that. And furthermore, I've seen more often than not front sight post, rear sights, whatever, come off or fail far more often than I've seen optics fail if you buy a good optic. So in the prepper world, in the defensive world, the sooner I can move you to an optic, the sooner we can make you a better shooter, for a faster shooter, and more aware of where your bullets are going to go, which is important in the legal context, right? Than you will be with big sloppy sights on a handgun.
Awesome. Good advice. Good advice. Okay. Okay.
Good. Good.
All right. So I think we covered everything, as well as had a great conversation, man. I hope you had a good time, and I hope that's a damn cough drop. And I want to let you know you've got an open invitation to come back to the show anytime you want to.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Talk guns all day long, So do me a favor. Let me bring something up here real quick so people can see it. And do me a favor, just something just happened. There we go. Let everybody know where they can find you, so that when they come looking for you to say, teach me stuff.
Yeah, so that's our website, Defenders USA. The website address is defenders-or defenders-usa.com. So defenders-usa.com. Of course, my phone number, I'll give it to you here. If people want to get a hold of me, contact me, call me anytime, feel free. We also do, because a lot of people, though I get people that come from around the world, around the U.S., they'll come to our trainings in different parts of the country where I do training, or my company does training. We also do online coaching, right? So if people really want to step up their game through an hour or two of online coaching, I'll usually ask them to send me videos of what they're doing so I can break it down individually, personally with them, and literally through Zoom or whatever that we're using, you can literally coach people into becoming a pretty good shooter in a dry fire environment, to where all they got to do is go out and confirm it on the range. So feel free to call me, text me, whatever else. We do that type of stuff. We have some training kind of all over the U.S., ranging from literally Montana to Texas to Colorado, Arizona, Missouri, I don't know, wherever else. I think we're setting up one in Washington and somewhere else here soon. So we're kind of around, and we've got a whole team of instructors. I'm just one of them, and a lot of them are far better. They're smart people. They're incredible. So however we can help you and train you, we do that. We do a lot of other non-gun training. So literally corporate training, you name it. If it's defensive in nature in the training world, we at Defenders do it, and would love to be a part of your journey as you grow yourself as a shooter, or more importantly, a defender.
All right. That's absolutely perfect. And what I always do is I'll put all of your information down in the bottom description of all the videos, so they can actually reach out and find you. Okay, well, perfect, man. Adam, thanks again, and that's the end of the video. So everybody else, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and as usual, stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you when I see you.
Thank you, brother.
Bye-bye.
Enjoyed it.
Yep, anytime.